at all. I still feel like a newbie at this.
Same.
So how are you, Colin? How have your past weeks been?
They've been good.
Oh, good.
How are you doing?
Glad. Yeah, I'm good. I'll definitely be happy when spring is over in Colorado because it's just like storming every day. But yeah, trying to keep my spirits up with, Jean-Paul Sartre.
I'm sure that can only help.
Yeah, of course. Existentialism, I'm accepting my choices to live in Colorado. Yeah. All right. Well, welcome everyone. Those of you who are here, we really appreciate it. And then those of you who are listening after I upload this to YouTube and Spotify. So I think that we are on chapter 5. Is that right? Marcel's chapter? Colin, is that...
Sorry, chapter 5.
Yeah, I think so. Or did we... Because I think we talked about Evich last time. Like, chapter 4 was, I think... Or did we not?
Sure. No, I think we did talk about Evich, yeah.
Yeah,
I don't remember where we ended, unfortunately.
Okay, all right. Okay. Yeah, I think it was chapter 5.
Cool.
Yeah. And so let's see. I am Elizabeth, and I am a professor of literature and a student of philosophy. I'm kind of on my own journey, but I am taking classes now. So I will, I guess, be getting a bachelor's, maybe. I don't know. Because my program doesn't have a master's in philosophy right now. So I'm just taking classes. And Colin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Colin, and I studied philosophy at Boston University and at Stony Brook. And, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we are talking about L'Âge de Raison, which is the Age of Reason, and it's basically the first part of a trilogy, The Roads to Freedom, or we can talk about the translation of that. It originally planned as a tetralogy, but I don't know what happened to the fourth book. Do you, Colin? Like, was it written or like half written, unpublished?
So my understanding is that it was partially, there's like, I don't know, like maybe 100 pages existing, but that Sartre never finished it and never published it. And I think it was only discovered after he died. And people debate why he didn't finish it. Some say it's because it took him too long to write it. Other people say that it was because I think the later books in the series got bad reviews.
Oh. Okay.
So, I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, that makes me think, because I still think that people who are interested in Sartre would want to read it. Like, I would still want to read it, even though it's not perfect. Yeah. I think like a similar thing happened maybe with Marcel Proust and his In Search of Lost Times, or I forget what the name of it is, but like he, the last half of it, volumes, I think like 4, 5, and 6, are not as finished as they could be. But I don't know if that's because he didn't have time because he passed on, or if he just decided not to finish it. I can't remember.
Interesting.
Yeah, so sorry.
I know Sartre also at some point decided literature was not a good avenue for expressing philosophy. So that may have been another reason he gave up on the book. But I think this is all speculative. No one actually knows why he gave up.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting. Well, I'll give a quick summary of the book for those who maybe this is the first episode that you're listening to. So basically, the book is set in 1938 in the shadows of World War II. The main character is Matthew. He's a French, or Matthew. I don't know what the French pronunciation of that name is, but he's a French professor of philosophy living in Paris, I think, who is preoccupied with the act of freedom, maybe maintaining his freedom, figuring out what it is. Marcel is his pregnant lover, and so Matthew questions how having a child and getting married, if that's what he had to do, would affect his freedom. And so other characters in the novel include two students, Boris and his sister Yvich, the latter of whom Sartre has, or Matthew, that's going to be my problem always, has an attempted affair with. Also, Matthew's brother Jacques, who is representative of an established figure in the bourgeois life, as well as Lola, who is a singer and in a club, and she's the aging lover who's having an affair with the student Boris, so aging from his perspective, perhaps. And then there's Daniel, who is Marcel's sometimes lover, who is also gay. Each chapter in the book is from a different character's perspective, but there are some characters or some perspectives that the reader does not get a chapter on, like Yvich. So, all right. So I think that we are starting, whether this is correct or not, on chapter 5 from Marcel's perspective. So, Colin, do you want me to start off, or do you want to start on this chapter?
I just wanted to make one more note, though. The other thing that's occurring in the background is the Spanish. The other thing that's occurring in the background is the Spanish Civil War, which plays a role at several points because one of Matthew's school friends has gone to Spain to fight on behalf of the Republicans against the fascists.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. And we get such an interesting reflection on that as well when he, in one of the chapters, I think we'll talk about. So, yeah, so that's great. So chapter 5 is from the perspective of Marcel. And I thought there were some interesting quotes in the beginning, maybe about gender, because she talks about freedom, and she says, this is on page 85, a human being who wakened in the morning with a queasy stomach with 15 hours to kill before next bedtime had not much use for freedom. Freedom didn't help a person to live. So I thought that was really interesting because she is probably talking about freedom as defined by her lover, maybe, since Matthew is kind of obsessed with freedom. And then from chapter 1, Matthew also says something in terms of gender and freedom. He says that he realized that he would never be able to put himself in Marcel's place. The freedom I talk about is the freedom of a sound and healthy man. So as opposed to however he sees Marcel. So my question that I wanted to ask you, Colin, just right off the beginning from this chapter, who is freedom for? Is Matthew perceiving or desiring a kind of freedom that's only useful for some? Is it not like a universal kind of goal or desire that he sees or he characterizes freedom as? And then why would Marcel say this? What does she mean that freedom doesn't help a person to live? Freedom, she doesn't have much use for it in her state.
Those are great questions about what is freedom for Sartre. Can you point me to the first quote, where the first quote is from?
Yes. Okay. So the first quote where Marcel is.
I'm sorry. The second quote. I'm sorry.
Okay. The second. Oh, sorry. The second one is on page 15.
Yeah. That's really interesting. I had forgotten about that first quote. The second quote. That does seem very gendered.
Yeah,
and kind of oddly gendered, because I don't feel like I don't understand Marcel, I'll have to say. I don't understand how Sartre understands Marcel, if that's a better way of putting it. Because like in the first quote, she seems to be saying like, at least part of it is, she's pregnant. So she has very real physical limitations on her freedom, which Matthew doesn't have, or, non-pregnant people have.
Right.
Yeah. Well, okay, yeah, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I think there is an ambiguous situation that's being created, or there's an element of ambiguity in terms of freedom for Marcel, because it seems like she has self-contempt almost for her state, even as she wants the baby. But she's not able to, perhaps because of her partner, because of the social situation, she's not able to create sort of an experience of her pregnancy that would allow her to maybe enjoy it and accept it and celebrate it, because she says on page 86, if I were an animal, I would be left alone. So there's kind of some disgust that she has about her body and her situation, even though she wants to continue it. So I think there's some ambiguity in what's going on with her.
Yeah, and I think, let me think. So I was thinking a little bit about Sartre's existential psychoanalysis, mm-hmm. and this is a bit of a tangent, but one thing I really struggle with, but I'm really trying to interpret this book in terms of his existential psychoanalysis, and at least as I understand it, and like this is definitely beginner's understanding, is that you should be trying, like, existential psychoanalysis tries to understand a character's or a person's subject's actions in terms of their fundamental projects, their fundamental commitment.
Okay.
So it tries to view, in the case of a biography, it would try to view the person's life as a whole in terms of their fundamental commitment. And I'm assuming that that's how you would also interpret the characters in a book. You would look at them and try to identify, like, what are they committed to? And how is that commitment illustrated in their thoughts, actions, dilemmas, how they face dilemmas, and the dilemmas they face, and their emotions, etc. Because, of course, for a start, like, the fundamental project goes all the way down. It determines the emotions you have when you're facing with a certain, do you face danger with fear or with glee? That would depend on your fundamental project. Yeah.
Okay, that's really interesting. So could we say, or might we say, that Marcel's project right now, even if it wasn't in the past, because this is the issue, right? That she always talked about and presumably felt toward marriage and children the same way that Matthew did, but maybe that's changed. And so could we say that her current project is love and family, and she is in, I don't know if she's in bad faith, but she's definitely not communicating that to her partner, and maybe not fully admitting it herself.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think, I agree. I mean, Matthew really hates Marcel, I think. Do you think that?
I think that's so sad. I hope not. I hope not. But that's really interesting. I mean, I think that, there's definitely some negative feelings, I would say.
Okay, I'll grant that. There's some negative feelings. Okay, that's fair. I guess, I read the end of the book last night, and that was kind of kept popping into my mind. And I'm not sure Daniel likes Marcel either. As, like, just to, make it even worse.
Yeah, well, Daniel might feel that way for different reasons than Matthew.
I agree.
But yeah, if Matthew feels that Marcel is now like a barrier to his freedom, then he would resent her.
Yeah, and anyways, all I'm just getting at is Marcel's in a really awful position. in this book, where she's tied to two men, neither of whom I think love her. I'm sure neither of them love her, because they say so. But
yeah, and she's not in a historical era where she can say, well, I'm just going to have this baby on my own and be like a single mom and enjoy that and be empowered or whatever. You know, she can't do that. So that is really difficult. You know, I was actually listening to, so you sent me, so thank you, that link to that YouTube page about like all of these great lectures. So I ended up listening to one of them. So I don't know how to pronounce her name, but she's a French philosopher, and it's the author of the book that you were reading, or that you are reading, We Were Not Born Submissive. How do you?
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so she has a lecture. Do you pronounce her name Manon Garcia, or is it Mano Garcia?
Yeah, Manon. Manon.
Manon. Okay, right. Yeah, the French accent. Okay, so so she was kind of talking about I guess the situation of people in general, but specifically women, and saying that she was saying, or maybe she was saying that Bourgeois would say, that we can't say that an individual is in bad faith when they are under such a restrictive sort of societal structure that they can't fully consent to the predicament they're in and supposedly like have chosen.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, so I don't know if we if that would be Marcel's predicament. But the other thing that I thought was interesting in this chapter was a quote on page 88 about relationships. And so Marcel is kind of reflecting on her own sort of responsibility in terms of her difficulty and, having the baby or not having the baby. It says, he couldn't know. It's my fault. I never told him anything. But she could not speak. It would not come out. Daniel knew how to interest her in herself. He had such a charming way of questioning her. He had only to behave like Daniel, talking about Matthew, what she wishes, because she wishes Matthew would, ask her what she feels. If he had helped me a little. So, and I can't remember where it is, but there's something that Marcel says, and it may be much later in the book, where she is kind of critiquing Matthew's way, not to him, but like in her head, his way of dealing with other people. She says that Matthew makes a statement, and so the other person has to reject it or not. But if Matthew had a softer approach, he would formulate the idea in terms of a question. So basically, like, the burden is less on the listener to respond. I don't know if that makes sense, but it's kind of like when someone makes a suggestion, and that instead of asking a question, like formulating a question to get responses. So maybe someone would say, let's do the meeting at 9:00 on Monday. And then just kind of waits for someone to speak up. Someone has to say, oh, I don't really like that time, or I don't really like that day. Instead of the alternative would be to, as like a leader of, like, let's say like a group at work or something, what day and time would work for everyone to do meetings, and then you would listen, and instead of making a statement. And so that's what I think Marcel is getting at. Like, Daniel has a softer approach. Daniel, I guess, asks her questions about herself or something, and Matthew doesn't. And so my question that I wanted to ask you is, what responsibility do we have toward each other? Is Daniel actually, because interesting that you said, Daniel doesn't like her either, but is Daniel nevertheless a more ethical partner than Matthew? What is the role of asking questions in terms of good relationships?
That's a big question.
Yeah.
It's easier for me to comment. I mean, so I'm not. Let me talk about Daniel for just a moment. I mean, I don't know if we want to talk about Daniel right now.
Yeah,
but I mean,
do it if you want to.
Boy, yeah. Daniel is is an awful person.
He might be a psychopath. I'm not sure.
Yeah, no, he really might. And I mean, it's all based in his self-loathing over the fact that he's gay. But still, yeah. And I mean, I think it's interesting because, like, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. Like, so Matthew engaged in conversations almost like they're disputations, or they're like, yes, it's combat. He says P, if you have to say not P in order to like move the conversation forward. There's no role for questions.
Exactly.
And Matthew's conversing, and it would be interesting to think about how that relates to the fact that he, I think, correctly reflects on himself at the end and says he's done nothing but negate in the book. Nothing but deny. Because I think that's correct. Questions seem really important. They help us form bonds with other people. We get to know what other people think in a way that is non-combative.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what I would say.
It creates an opportunity for someone to share, and that seems like Matthew's, like, maybe that would be his solution, because it causes him a lot of stress, I think about what's in other people's heads, and so maybe some of that is he doesn't want to really know what's like in Ivich's head or in Marcel's head, but it seems like he's also suffering from the lack of knowledge.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Matthew and Daniel, I think, who I think become our two main characters. That's at least how I read the book. Does that fit with your reading?
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely the most complex and compelling characters.
Yeah, and we have and I think we just have they have the largest POVs chapters. Yeah, they're both very isolated individuals. I think that's somewhat debatable. The commitment to Marcel with Daniel, I think, is, or Daniel's commitment to Marcel is, I'm not quite sure how to understand that. Yeah, I feel like I changed the topic. My bad.
Yeah, no, that's great. Actually, that reminds me of, I don't know if you had any chance or even intended to read the Iris Murdoch book on Sartre, but okay, so on page 129, she talks about actually isolation. She says that he isolates the self so that it treats others not as objects of knowledge, but as objects to be feared, manipulated, and imagined about. So when you isolate the self, asking questions treats someone else, the other, as an object of knowledge. They have knowledge, and you are sort of asking them a question to open up that gate of knowledge. But when you isolate the self, as you were saying, I don't know, Murdoch, I just like the way she articulates things sometimes, because that's true, because Matthew fears others, Matthew manipulates others, and he imagines about them. He imagines conversations in his head.
Do you think Matthew manipulates others? I mean, Daniel manipulates others. Does Matthew?
So Daniel manipulates others in order to poke at them and make them feel uncomfortable, and he delights in that. So that's why I think I was calling him a sociopath, because that's not nice. And so
no,
but Matthew,
I mean, he's a sadist. I think Sartre would say he's a sadist, and a sadist. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So Matthew isn't. I don't think Matthew is ill-intended, but Matthew is whether he is a coward or it's total selfish, like self-protection, he manipulates others in the way that I think actually is not like super uncommon. Like I remember something in the book where he said, when he's talking to Odette, his brother's wife, he says, he intentionally like tries to put some humor to his voice to be like playful, or when he's with Yvitch, he says, I'm going to talk so much that she'll forget that she's angry, you know, like, so he has these little intentional kind of manipulations of his own behavior just to kind of protect himself or make someone else feel a certain way. And so even though it might be like not necessarily harmful, it's still a manipulation.
That's a good point. And I feel like that gets back to the fact that it feels like, I mean, Murdoch talks about this a lot, that like so I didn't actually read the whole book. Did you read the whole all of Murdoch? I did not.
I did. Yeah.
That's good. I should do that. She talks about how Matthew's reflection seems to isolate him from other people. Yeah. And I think that's true. And I think that's a perfect example. What you're talking about is a perfect example of that. He is always reflecting on every single situation with people. Always trying to analyze what they're doing and what he's doing and what emotion they have and what he's trying to accomplish. And says things in order to make it happen, in order to make what he wants to happen.
Right. And, I just wonder, if you are spending so much time thinking, can you act?
Right. Yeah.
And that's his thing. He wants to act, but he's just waiting for the perfect one, the perfect act.
Yeah. And the few times he does act, I mean, so like, well, maybe we should go through the next chapter instead.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, but if you want to go on to the next chapter, that's fine, or just finish your thought. Like, I think that's fine too.
It does feel like there's a few times in which he does act.
Okay.
Possibly when he stabs himself with a knife.
Ah, yes, there you go. His impulsivity that he loves Yvitch so much for, as you articulated.
And then maybe also when he tells Marcel that he doesn't love her, when he plans on telling. I mean, I'm not sure it only happens once, but he does do this thing where he thinks, I'm going to tell her I love her. And then he says he doesn't love her.
Right. Yeah.
Right in the last chapter, or second last chapter, or whatever. And that's pretty impulsive. Like, that's definitely not pre-planned.
Right. And so, when he does stab himself, he feels elated. Like like that's the time he feels like happy about himself and overjoyed because he did this thing. So yeah. So I don't know. That's pretty curious.
Yeah, I agree. And it's interesting because he feels elated in the first, but when he said, but the thing with telling Marcel he doesn't love her, that's like encapsulates everything. He doesn't love her. He just doesn't. Like, it's so obvious how much he doesn't love her. And so it's like his irreflective action gets away from his constant overthinking, his constant thinking, and planning and manipulating. And it actually expresses the truth because, without, like, because he doesn't think in that moment, he expresses the truth of the situation. Something along those lines.
Right. Yeah. So that, I don't know, then does that mean that we are truly free when we are outside of ourselves, when we're not ruminating or trying to be super rational, but when we are kind of irrational and carefree and even like emotional? I mean, I don't necessarily... Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, I'm not sure that sounds like what I think Sartre would say, but what do I know? So.
No, I don't know. I mean, Matthew is such a reflective character.
Yeah.
And you feel like his reflections are, like that's where the core of the novel is. So I'd hate to say that it's not, that it's somehow false or something. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe something, further along in the book can help us answer that.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. So do you want to take the next chapter?
Sure.
Matthew
Chapter 6.
And Ivich at the museum.
Yep. So Matthew and Ivich go to the museum on a kind of a date. And they look at the paintings of Gauguin's paintings, but they're distracted by a bougie couple who says dumb bougie things, which drive Ivich crazy, and then they leave. And then Ivich, I think, psychoanalyzes Matthew.
Yeah,
and that's more of the chapter, and that's the chapter. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good summary. I thought something really, I know we usually talk about like this relationship, and I think there's some interesting things to say about it, but I thought there was a really cool moment about maybe a commentary on aesthetics or a commentary on beauty and truth.
Yeah.
It says on 91, and so they're in the museum, they're looking at a portrait, and he says, the week before, when he had seen the portrait for the first time, Matthew had thought it was good. At present, he felt oversaturated by reality and truth, permeated by the spirit of the Third Republic. So I thought that kind of foreshadowed the war that's coming in a sense, or like commented on it. And so I wanted to ask if you thought this had any implications here about the relationship between aesthetics and truth, or beauty and truth. Are they in opposition, or is it pleasure that he is indicating as contradictory, that he can't really take in an experience with joy because there's too much, real things, too many real things going on? So is there not a role for beauty when that happens?
I'm not quite sure. I think it's interesting because in the previous paragraph he says, pictures, he thought with annoyance, have no positive force. They are no more than suggestions. Indeed, their existence depends on me. I am free as I confront them. Too free. He felt burdened by an additional responsibility and somehow in fault. So, it's his. The pictures are just suggestions. It's his responsibility to understand them. In some sense, he gives them their meaning, which seems to account for the fact that he can have two very different experiences of the paintings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. So it completely depends on his subjectivity.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, I thought that was an interesting quote as well that you read. He was too free. He felt burdened by an additional responsibility and somehow in fault. He does feel quite guilty and kind of regretful about his own positionality, and I wondered if, I don't know, maybe I'm not being generous enough toward this character, but it seems somewhat, I don't know, unheroic or childish to feel burdened by a responsibility when you could look at it as an opportunity to be free and to enact freedom, because it's open for you. I mean, what does it mean to be too free?
Yeah, I agree. What do you think is the relationship between the good, the reality, and the truth in this section?
I mean, I would
I'm
love
not
to
sure.
read like more on aesthetics, like,
Yeah,
you know,
same. Okay.
what other
Yeah.
people have also said. But I mean, I think that, you know, along with what Matthew is saying, I think he is expressing a truth that beauty and aesthetics takes on a different role. I don't think it has no role when there's tragedy or, you know, kind of important or weighty things happening in your life. But I think that it does have a different role. I just don't know if Matthew kind of explores that, or at least I didn't write down any quotes that show him doing that. But I think beauty is needed in, like, say, wartime or the pandemic or something like that. And I think that standards still apply, you know, because thinking about the pandemic, you know, and the paths that we could take with social media, like drowning ourselves in social media, or being creative and being artistic. And a lot of people started creating content or pursuing projects. And that was kind of like life-giving and salvific. So I think that beauty can have a very truthful and liberating aspect for us in difficult times.
You know, it seems like, looking at this passage again, which I also underlined, it seems like Matthew is... So it seems like, for whatever reason, he's not seeing the painting. He's seeing its components. He's seeing the techniques that are he saw everything that the classic light could clarify: the walls, the canvas on their frames, the scumbled colors on the canvas, but not the pictures. The pictures had become extinct, and it appeared monstrous in the depths of this little domain of relevance that people could have found to depict non-existent objects upon canvases. So the painting has lost its meaning for him. That's how I would read that. The painting has lost its meaning. It's just become just a conflation, just a structure of colors on a canvas, and he sees nothing beyond that.
Okay, so do you think that that's because Matthew is, as we were talking, so isolated? He doesn't allow the picture or the art or the museum to become subject and to create a reciprocal relationship, an exchange of energies. So it's not that there's not something there that he couldn't find truth in, you know. There's not it isn't that it's impossible for beauty to have a role, but he's only open to meaning and truth or knowledge as far as he sets the boundaries. There's no openness for again, like the Murdoch quote, for an object being an object of knowledge. It's only so when you're so isolated, you tend to use objects or others, and if they can't meet your needs, then they're no longer useful or wanted or needed. And so he's doing that maybe with the painting and the museum.
I guess I keep thinking that, you know, for Sartre, the world loses its meaningfulness in anxiety. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the whole thing about existentialism is that you're creating a meaning, right? There's no inherent meaning.
Yeah.
But I don't know. Then does that lead to isolation? I don't know. I don't necessarily know if Matthew is... I don't think he's never someone to really take seriously and admire and contemplate, but I did read something in the letters that I was reading. Actually, it was just like in the introduction to his letters during the war. And I think apparently he says at some point that Matthew is irresponsible with his freedom. Like
That's very interesting.
He's a character that, who I don't know. That's what it said. Irresponsible with his freedom. So I don't know if that necessarily applies to this part right here, but just something, I guess, to keep in mind if that's what Sartre really intended.
That's interesting because Murdoch, I feel like she says several times that she sees Matthew as being a portrait of Sartre, and maybe Sartre's being critical of himself, but maybe she's wrong in identifying the two.
Right? Yeah, I don't know. I wish that there was an actual, because that's something that the person whoever was writing a foreword, they articulated it as if they were pretty confident, but I would love for him to, I haven't read all of the letters, so I don't know, but I would love to find Sartre actually saying that. So I'll let you know if I find it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah.
So the other thing to mention, I guess, in this chapter, so Sartre's disdain of the bourgeois is always on display, I think. I guess, yeah. I'll throw that out there, which is pretty funny. Yeah. But I guess the other important thing is Ivic is after they leave. I don't know. There's a little bit more about Ivic's character in here, which is kind of interesting.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
On 95. Ivic had a way of talking about the illustrious dead that scandalized him slightly. She did not establish any relation between the great paintings and their pictures. Pictures were things, beautiful objects to be appreciated and possessed. They seemed to her to have always existed. Painters were men like other men. She felt no gratitude to them for their works and did not respect them. Is Ivic a narcissist?
See, I don't know. I guess you could go two ways with this. You could try to see from Matthew's perspective and psychoanalyze Ivic. What is she doing? She is taking away any sort of divinity or sacredness from these artists who, I guess, could be admired, could be put on a pedestal. But who is to judge that and say that that's the way that you should approach? Maybe she has a more familiar approach to art. She has a less bourgeois approach to art because she's not imbuing it with something that has sort of metaphysical or economical value. She's going to relate to it as she would relate to a friend on a more familiar level. So I don't know. I'm inclined to take Ivic's side. I definitely don't think she is a narcissist. I don't think we could know that. She just seems carefree. And furthermore, Matthew loves how real Ivic makes the world because she has this energy. But at the same time, he critiques her, which I find his critiques rather petty.
How so?
So let me see if.
Or we don't have to go there yet. We can continue it. Yeah.
No, I think it's great. I don't know. I don't know if I have a quote, but it seems to me that Sartre, when he is critiquing Ivic, he's revealing that he only likes her the way he likes her, and he's not open to, because if we're in a relationship with someone, we can't design them according to our preferences, right? We have to love all of them or be interested in all parts of them and learn how to like different aspects of them. But he seems to like what he likes and dislikes what he dislikes, and he doesn't give any room to nuance, to trying to see the other side. He just he's just like, oh, this is distasteful. It just seems to me like someone who is closed-minded and it wouldn't easily get along with others because they're difficult to please. But Ivich hangs out, and he still hangs out with her. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, maybe he's just being honest with what he doesn't like about her. But I think just anytime he critiques her, it doesn't feel like it's in a spirit of generosity.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's very interesting.
I mean, he also, I don't know. He is, he has a lot of desire with Ivich, but it seems like he doesn't allow himself to be free around her because he's so preoccupied with controlling the situation. And I just think he's stifling his own freedom when he does that.
I think that's a really good point. I think that Matthew definitely feels at his most, like Ivich throws Matthew off more than anyone else, I would say.
Yeah.
He is always trying to control her because he really can't. Like he not like she he just like I don't remember where it says that, basically, she only went out with him or she only went to the museum because he wanted to go to the museum. She only did things because he wanted to do things. Like, all of her interest was fake, she says.
Right, where she doesn't like to feel, and he gets really upset. He says, well, I thought that he's kind of hurt. He's like, I thought that you loved doing this. And she says, I hate being made to feel obligations toward things I like. Which I think is such a great quote.
Yes.
It's like you like it, but you don't want to feel obligated. And then if you feel obligated, I don't know. I love that.
Yeah. But just to get back to your previous point, like on 94, it says, so she didn't mean to leave him. That did not prove he was forgiven. Ivich had a horror of leaving places and people, even if she hated them, being afraid of what might come next. She acquiesced with sulky indolence in the most disagreeable situations and ended by finding a sort of solace in them. Matthew was glad all the same. As long as she stayed with him, he could stop her thinking. If he talked incessantly, if he asserted himself, he could for a little while delay the angry and contemptuous thoughts that would soon possess her mind. He must talk, and talk at once, about no matter what.
Yeah, it seems like he's trying to produce their encounter. I mean, but he doesn't even attend to his own bodily needs. It says on 95, right. Matthew wanted to wipe his forehead, but he didn't dare do so. I'm like, wipe your forehead, take off your coat of your eye. Like he's trying to, it's like he's so desperate to like hold on to this relationship. So there must be something that he deeply like needs from it or values in it. But at the same time, it's just not perfect for him.
And when you put it like that, I mean, it sounds like he's afraid of Ivich, actually. He's afraid of losing her. He's afraid of what she'll say. He's afraid of her derisive remarks. Maybe he's afraid of her spontaneity, too.
Yeah, I mean, because it's, it's not like he has to think too much. He has to have the perfect reason or the perfect set of reasons in order to commit. That's why in a later chapter when, I forget what his name is, Brunet wants him to join the Communistic Party. He's like, well, I just don't feel passionate enough yet. I'm going to wait for, to be really inspired. And Ivich doesn't need that. I guess that, that makes me see your comment last time about her being impulsive. Like, that makes me agree with you because it's like Ivich does it. If that's what impulsivity is, it's not thinking before you act, then yeah, for sure. Ivich does that and Matthew can't.
Yeah, he can. Yeah. Well, he does it. He does like twice maybe, but that's not his normal mode. Yeah. Yeah, she's just impulsivity. She's like pure, I guess. I mean, her and Boris are both somewhat puzzling figures, I would say. Even though we get more of Boris than Ivich. Ivich is definitely the most opaque character in the book, I think. Because we
I mean, she hangs out with, her professor, even if she kind of wants to and she kind of doesn't want to, but I think she says what she thinks, or at least, I guess we don't know. I mean, we could only say if someone says what they think or if they don't think, if we get their interiority, and we just don't get Ivich's interiority. So I don't know if it seems like she's saying what she thinks, but actually I don't know because I don't know what her interiority is.
Yeah, we only get Matthew's analysis of her.
Yeah.
And her, and her words. We don't get anything from her perspective. Yeah. But she has Matthew nailed to the ground. I would say, like in terms of, he comes across as rather pathetic, honestly, in this chapter, I think. At the bottom of 99, she says, "You're settled," and wait, is this where I want to read?
Yeah.
Where does he say he could become a writer at any time? I don't remember that unfortunately. Where he could go to Spain or whatever. I don't know. But like, it's the bottom 99. She says, "You're settled and you won't change for all the money in the world." "Indeed," says Matthew, "and how do you know?" "It's an impression. The impression is that your life and your ideas about everything are all set. You reach out to things when you think they're within your scope, but you don't trouble to go and get them."
Right. I thought that you weren't prepared to risk anything. With you, there's a sense of security.
Yeah. And Matthew, of course, doesn't like that. "No, oh no, he, of course, if you tell me that you aren't like that." "No," he said in a low voice, "I'm like that just as you thought me." So he's embarrassed.
Yeah, I mean, he definitely is open to other people's, to what is the word? Interiorize the other person's perspective. Like, he lets that get him down. He doesn't know. It's almost like Matthew doesn't know who he is, because he's like, do I want freedom? What is freedom? Yeah, what do I want? Have I made choices? Like, what are the decisions I want to make? He questions a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, I guess it's true. Like, so you reach out to things when you think they're within your scope. I mean, because Matthew does grab her and kiss her, but he doesn't ask her how she feels about it or pursues. He doesn't pursue a relationship with her in terms of asking her if she wants to be in a relationship with him.
That's true.
So it's kind of contradictory. Like, he kissed her and then he's just spending the rest of the time worrying about, I don't know, it seems, I don't know, it just seems suspect. Like, when, there's a lack of communication.
Yeah, I mean,
And the thing is, on 101, when he says, "Well, you should have told me," it always gets me when Matthew says, "Well, or about Marcel, she would speak up if she had something to say." But he doesn't do that either. So.
Yes. Yeah, all his reflection doesn't lead, he blames others for his own obstinacy. For his own lack of interest in them, maybe is a better way of putting it. And I'm back on page 100. Ivich says, "With you, there's a sense of security, never any fear of the unexpected." "True," said Matthew dryly, "if you mean I don't act on impulse, which denigrates what you just said, right, or diminishes. I could, like anybody else, but it seems sort of lousy to me." So he's full of excuses.
Yeah, he definitely tries to justify. But I guess every character is really concerned with justifying what they do or what they don't do.
Yeah. What are you thinking of?
Well, I mean, like, for instance, Matthew is not, if anything, he's not a scary person. So Marcel definitely could have like been courageous enough in that relationship to say what she thinks, right? But she kind of rationalizes it and justifies it, which is probably half true, but half not true, that Matthew could have made it easier for her to speak up, right? I mean, that's true. Yes. He could have been more empathic or more, inviting in a sense, but he's not like gonna punch her or something or slap her around if she says what she thinks, right? Like, that's not who Matthew is. Matthew is an intellectual, and he's like a decent person. So yeah. So it's kind of a rationalization of her own behavior. And then Daniel, I think, I don't know if I have like a specific quote to point to right now, but I seem to remember him like kind of just because he goes back and forth with what he wants to do, like killing the cats, and he goes back and forth between self-contempt and like rationalizing why he didn't or why he wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel's right. I see what you're saying.
And I guess Jacques does it too, right? When he says that he also rationalizes his own behaviors in life. And I mean, I think there's two ways of looking at it, or there's two sides to the coin. Like, what I want as a reader of Matthew to do is just, and I think a lot of characters want him to do when they're being good-natured toward Matthew, which I don't think they always are, but when his best friend, and we'll get there, I guess, but his friend Brunet, who wants him to join the Communist Party, when it finally comes to the moment where like Matthew, it's clear that Matthew's not going to join, Brunet says, well, that's okay. Just be truthful or be authentic about what you want and what you don't want. Like, that's okay. You don't have to, he says, you don't have to justify your decisions to anyone. Just infuse a decision with meaning. And I can see like Sartre saying that, right? Like, that's existentialism. It's like, make a decision and then make your decision good. Like, accept what you want, accept what you desire. There's no God to tell you that it's wrong.
Yes. No one is responsible other than you.
Right.
You are ultimately responsible. And that's the anxiety of freedom. I guess realizing that is the anxiety of freedom.
Yeah. So, I mean, if it's true, like if that person who wrote the foreword, has some truth to what they're saying, and that Matthew is irresponsible with his freedom, then what would change? Like, in your opinion, how would Matthew change to be responsible in his freedom?
I mean, I guess I think that I'm not sure I fully understand how to interpret the end of the book. But I do think that Matthew, all he does is deny. His a few attempts at affirmation are not that, don't have much weight behind them, or aren't that convincing. I think his most authentic, if that's the right word, moments are when he tells Marcel he doesn't love her, when he tells Ivich he doesn't know what he wants from her. Which, I mean, is not that much of an affirmation, honestly. But it's a way of denying Ivich, basically. So at the end of the book, he has no girlfriend, no lover. He's not a father. He's not a communist. he's not a Republican in Spain. So I guess I don't know if those are misuses of his freedom, but I would think that the real freedom would be to, I guess I thought it would be to commit or to affirm something, not just to deny something. And, you know.
Right. To deny your no's and affirm your yeses. Like to have this coordination or alignment between your actions and your desires. Like to be authentic with yourself. On page 161, I think he gets also kind of close to being authentic. I know this is kind of like skipping ahead, but he says that I like my green curtains. I like to take the air in the evening on my balcony, and I don't want any change. I enjoy railing against capitalism. I enjoy feeling fastidious and aloof. I enjoy saying no, always no. And I should be afraid of any attempt to construct a finally habitable world, because I should merely have to say yes and act like other people. So I think he has like an authentic moment there after he is like so down on himself, because he feels, part of himself feels really bad about saying no to his friend and not committing to the Communist Party, because he's like, well, I know deciding would be like passion, I think he says, and like emotions and blood and flesh, and it would be like real life. And he says something in that chapter to Brunet when he is in his apartment, in Matthew's apartment. He says, you know, I'm starting to lose my sense of reality. I don't even know what is real anymore. But when you were in my apartment, I feel like the furniture is real. I feel like everything is real. And I wonder if that's how he feels about Yvitch as well. Because if Yvitch is so impulsive and she has so much energy and she just kind of like follows whatever she wants, or she has like an unhappy expression if she doesn't feel happy, then maybe he likes those characters who have followed a path that he's just for whatever reason unwilling to follow. He's unwilling to say, to be impulsive, to make commitment, because he's too, like, I don't know, in his head or something.
Okay, so like maybe this is maybe this gets back to the ambiguity of Yvitch, but one thing I'm stuck on is Yvitch like an emblem of freedom? She's definitely impulsive, and in a sense she does what she wants, but she's not really committed to anything. In fact, she's kind of the opposite of that. It seems to me, at least.
I mean,
where was I going? One sec, hold on, one sec. Where was I going with that? I guess I was thinking that, like, and I guess I wonder if you could, maybe we just don't know, but I guess I kind of wondered if her kind of, what's the word? She's almost ephemeral or mercurial, and maybe that's why the paintings don't become fully real for Matthew. Like, they kind of dissolve. I don't know. Maybe that's reading too much into that. Because she doesn't latch on to any single thing. She's, I don't know. Like, so, for Brunet's life is communism. Like, that is his life, to fight for the Communist Party. And right. He is 100% committed to that. Like, which is, I think, also a problem for Sartre ultimately, because, in a sense, I think he's denying his own freedom by doing what the communist does. I don't know. I'm not sure if that's true, but that's a possibility. Yeah.
Right. No, I think that that's really, I think that you're right. I think that Yvitch is free in a way that Sartre wouldn't completely endorse, because she doesn't have like the other element to it. She doesn't have the I don't know. I mean, I think Yvitch is swallowed by her powerlessness. Like she doesn't try to make, like when she's so kind of downtrodden because she doesn't know she's going to pass her exams, and she feels like she's forced to go back to where, you know, her parents are, to her hometown, if she doesn't pass. She can't stay in Paris. But the thing is that someone who's taking control over their life would find a way, right? And I think Sartre puts that burden on the individual. Like, you need to, maybe even more than de Beauvoir does, because Beauvoir really looks at like the social situation, especially of women. But I think Sartre says, well, there is a way. You just have to work at it. You just have to do something. So she shouldn't be sad, and like that's her, you know, I guess her weakness or her struggle, because Matthew is always saying like, oh, and she's not meeting me, or she is not in a good mood because she's preoccupied with her fate, right? But the whole point of Sartre's existentialism, I guess, is to create your own fate and your own destiny. But I agree with you as well with Brunet, because, well, there's something that I found in the letters that Sartre did say. And he says, one always falls short of the thoughts one has created because one believes them, which doesn't mean that I don't believe in mine, but ultimately I know full well they're the product of my freedom. And I think for Sartre, that's an important element to saying yes and making a commitment and acting. You always need to have one sort of foot in remembering that you did this.
Yep.
And you could have done something else. And it would have been also fine.
Yeah. Can I touch on the image thing for a moment? Because I think you raised, we've talked about her impulsivity a lot, but we haven't talked about her fatalism. And I'm not sure that really even occurred to me before you said that. You know, she's convinced she's going to fail her exams, and she does fail them. And she's convinced if she fails her exams, she'll go live with her parents, which she does, as far as we know. I guess we don't know that, but that's heavily implied. I mean, so in that sense, she's not free in the Sartrean sense at all. I mean, she doesn't do anything to try to prevent her failure of the exams. Like, I mean, maybe that's not, we don't know if that's true, but in the book, what she does is she has her exams the next day. What does she do? Well, she stays out all night partying and dancing. At the club. She doesn't study. She doesn't work. She doesn't really face her situation, which I guess seems to be she doesn't really take control of the situation, which I think is a crucial aspect for Sartrean freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, she kind of throws herself into a nihilistic hopelessness at the moment she, like, things get hard, and she feels like, she can't. And that's kind of the same thing with her brother as well, right? Like with Boris, just in his comment in the beginning of the book that he was going to blow his brains out at 25. I mean, he is closing off. That may be like a commitment, but you're closing off your possibility and all the possibilities, so you're choosing not to confront and enact your freedom by like ending all possibilities of your freedom.
Right. And because and Boris, I think both of the kids like really love these very definitive statements. One's life is over at 25. There's no point in living longer. Youth is the only, youth is where the value is, etc. It's very they have certain commitments, and there's a kind of fatalism in both the kids, I guess is what I'm thinking. And because the lack of awareness of their own freedom, the fact that they're the one generating these commitments, they've chosen their values. They've chosen this kind of fate.
Yeah, and I think then, that makes me think that, well, Marcel, if she is, I don't know, I think that if I almost think that if Matthew would have found the money and found the doctor and said, okay, we're setting it up, like I'm taking you, she would have gone through the abortion and kind of given up too. I don't know if she would have said, like, hey, this is actually not what I want. I'm going my own path and doing my own thing. Or you're coming with me and you're marrying me because you're in this too. You know, I don't, if Matthew was like a stronger, more like aggressive, pushy person, I think Marcel might have done exactly what Yvette and Boris have shown that they also do, is just kind of give up. But Matthew, he is like the other extreme that's also not a great place, because he is not giving up. He's pushing through, but not necessarily doing anything. So I'm not sure there's like a character that is, you know, the model character of you know, Sartre's philosophy.
I agree.
At least not in his first novel. I don't know about the number 2 and number 3.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think the best Matthew, you know, I think one reason people identify Matthew is because he seems insightful.
Yeah.
About freedom, but he's not free. No, I mean that's his own thought. He's no more free at the beginning than he was at the end. Not having a girlfriend doesn't make him not free. Doesn't make him more free. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think it's yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I was just gonna say, I know that we have a lot more to talk about. We can continue. I just wanted to give Dave a chance to like say something, because I know he's in Ireland, so it's like it's super late. Dave, did you want to like? I don't want to like make you like stay forever if you, and I just want to give you an opportunity if you want to chime in with anything. Oh, I have to. Okay, there you go. Sorry. Yeah. Hey.
Well, hey, thanks so much for probably giving me the best preparation for a book I haven't read yet, ever. Something.
But you have it, right? You said you bought it, so
yeah, I'll probably start reading it this weekend when I finish yet another book. Another story. Something is kind of ringing around my head in this one, and it is on this episode. I mean, that I didn't kind of think of last time. But is there maybe an undercurrent in this story that Matthew is like just conflicted with every option he has, because he seems to be the center of like his friend pulling him one way, his wife has this pregnancy that he's not completely on board with. He has this 17-year-old girlfriend, which is a whole issue in its own right. And, you know, for me, I'm like thinking, oh, so he's at this museum and he sees the paint is on the canvas and the frames and stuff, but he doesn't see the clarity of the pictures. Maybe it's because he's focusing on all the crap that's going on in his life and he can't focus on it because of the conflict. Does that make any sense? Because it kind of sounded like he has so much going on that he can't concentrate. I don't know.
Yeah. What was that can you re-articulate what you said about him being conflicted with every decision? Is that, what did you say about that?
It seems like, from what you guys are saying, it just and maybe just my own thoughts on it, or that it seems like everything in his life is not what he wants it to be, or he's not sure it's what he wants it to be. I think at one point it was mentioned he could go and be a writer if he wanted, and he's never, and he hasn't gone and done it. And he could go and join the Communist Party in Spain and fight with the Republic side, but then, and he doesn't do that, and he feels to me, from how you explained it, that he in some ways has someone pulling him in a different direction in all directions. And he's not able to kind of pick a lane and decide who he wants to go with or what he wants to go with or what is his own choice in it. And maybe, you know, he's got the distraction like a 17-year-old girlfriend who he thinks is the image of freedom, perhaps. But because if you ask some people, I'm sorry for the rambling, but if you ask some people, like, oh yeah, if I could go back to 17, 18, I'd do it all differently. And I mean, just again, I haven't read the book, and I don't really know the characters other than listening to you guys. I'm just wondering what you thought of that. Does that make any sense?
Right. No, I think that's really good. Colin, I'll let you go respond first if you have something you want to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's true that I think it's definitely the case that Matthew is totally not committed. He's conflicted in a bunch of different ways. He's not married to Marcel. He just acts so he's not even committed to Marcel. He's not committed to Ivich. He's not committed to, his only commitment is to not be committed to these people, or to any particular thing in his life outside of kind of his basic everyday comforts, bougie comforts, which is another way of not being committed to communism. Yeah, and I don't know. I think that might affect the way he perceives the art and why he can't find an anchor in the art, because he can't really justify one interpretation over another interpretation, much like he can't justify picking one path over another path. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was going to say that your thought, Dave, was really, it made me think about how he goes on and on about Spain. And I think if I'm understanding what you're saying correctly, it's like someone who keeps talking about this particular dream, and just because they're not experiencing it and living it, they think it's the better choice. Like the grass is always greener on the other side, but there's a possibility that he would have chosen to participate in the Spanish Civil War, and he would have also found, himself in a predicament of questioning or himself or what was happening. And it's almost like, so are you saying like he almost seems like a character that's kind of like romanticizing about different paths, but the thing would be like there's something difficult in everything. It's like, for instance, I might say, oh, I want to learn this. I'm going to stop learning French and learn like this other language right now because, French is too hard and this other one will be easy. But then when I start studying the other one, it's like that one is hard too. And it's like any path that you choose, there will be like some sticky elements to it. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, that's kind of a really good way to put it. Like, he has these 3 or 4 options, but if he doesn't take any of them, he's kind of, he can't fail by not choosing an option.
Mm-hmm.
So he's still kind of not making a commitment, even though all of these options, if he took them, could take his life in a certain direction.
I mean, that makes me think of Ivich when she said.
Go ahead.
That makes me think of Ivich when she says that there's no risk in Matthew's life.
Yeah, that's true. Right.
Because risk implies the possibility of failure, and that requires him to be committed to something to fail at it. And he goes out of his. I think that's the bourgeois side. Like, that's another one of Matthew's conflicts. He hates the bourgeois from abstract principles, I think, but he values being a bourgeois. He values the bourgeois lifestyle. He works for the government. He's a professor.
Yeah, and that's what, Jacques, his brother, says. You're already doing these things. You've already decided. Just accept your decisions and accept what you decided. It's kind of, in a sense, like childish to fantasize about something and not take steps toward it. And I think on some part he, to some aspect, like he realizes that. So yeah, thanks, Dave. That was really observant and astute. I think that's great.
Well, just trying to make sense of. I'll be reading it from this weekend, so I might have more insightful input next time. But thanks for the great conversation again.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Yeah. So, so Colin, I don't know. We've kind of like passed the hour. Yeah. I think. Is there anything else you wanted to say? Because the next chapter is about Daniel and his murder or attempted murder of the cats, and I just feel like we need to like give the appropriate space to that conversation, because Daniel is a great character.
Yeah, I agree. I think Daniel is almost a whole new conversation topic, and
yeah,
he really slowly emerges in the book as being the second main character. And maybe Matthew's primary antagonist, if that's such a thing. I mean, Matthew's primary antagonist is probably himself, but his second primary antagonist is Daniel. At least that's how I read it at the moment. So yeah, maybe we should stop there.
Yeah, I think so. Well, great conversation. I know. I feel like we could talk about this book like 5 hours at a time, honestly, because there's just like one thought leads to another. But we'll pick it up next time, and I think that'll be a great episode. I'm super excited to talk about Daniel. Okay, well, thanks so much, Colin, for having another episode, having another conversation with me about this. I'm very much enjoying this book, and yeah, it's pretty awesome. So, and thanks, Dave, for joining in. We always appreciate your participation. All right, Colin. So meet back in a couple of weeks again.
Yeah, that sounds wonderful. And thanks for running this, Elizabeth. This is great.
Yeah, well, thanks for, suggesting Sartre. So definitely not someone I want to miss. Okay, well, thanks, everyone. This will be up on my YouTube eventually. And yeah, spread the word so get more people involved as well. So, all right, well, thanks, everyone. See you next time.